Cool. Okay. Cut over to here. And we'll jump right back into it.
Awesome.
Hello, I'm Kurt Lidke, Executive Director of Klamath Film, and you just watched a short documentary about an internet sensation, Gone in a Flash. With us is the film's director, Justin Zimmerman. Justin, thank you so much for joining us again.
Fantastic to be here. Thank you.
Well, welcome back to the Klamath Independent Film Festival. Not only did you have a documentary in last year's festival, but you were one of only a couple filmmakers who actually got 2 films into this year's festival. Congratulations for that. Your other film is an animated short, Jack the Radio Creatures. This film is a fascinating documentary about a historic moment in the internet. What made you want to make this film, and what is your association with the main subject, Jim?
Well, I'm just fascinated with the way in which technology is used to tell stories in this very seminal time. It was just bonkers. The internet was just taking off. People were finding their voice in sometimes very negative ways and being in a sense judged by the popular culture in a way that we've never had before, and in a direct way that I don't think we'll ever have again. And so for me, I had been working on making a larger form documentary about these Flash stars and had chatted with all kinds of seminal figures in the industry. And Jim was just the perfect place to start because his work was recognized and watched by so many people, but he never was recognized as the creator behind the work, if that makes sense. And of course, if you just watch the documentary, you know what a compelling and interesting subject he is. So it just seemed the perfect place to start when I was investigating this kind of strange point in popular culture.
It's very reminiscent. The internet itself. The people who are constantly on it also have such ADD that it seems like something is gone in a flash. As soon as it becomes popular. Like, I related a lot to Jim only because in my history, I was one of the original employees of MySpace. And so that in of itself is deserving of a documentary at some point, talking about how that fluke somehow became #1 in the world and ended up, launching the whole social media revolution. But seeing kind of Jim's path was like, I felt like I had somehow lived that a little bit in a way. This film, to paraphrase Wu-Tang Clan, Flash ruled everything around us for a time in internet lore. For me, I vividly recall Flash videos were everywhere when I was in college in the late 90s and early 2000s. I think Frog in a Blender was the famous one that was the first one that I saw. And then they were just like gone overnight. Like suddenly they just weren't cool anymore, or, browsers updated and suddenly you couldn't watch them anymore. It kind of like this film. Myself and our judges, when we first watched this, we thought this film was a trailer, not the actual film, because of the way that you structured it. Now, I get the kind of tongue-in-cheek approach, but why that aesthetic to end it so abruptly?
Well, 2 things, and Joe Cartoon, the Frog in the Blender gentleman, I chatted with quite a bit. Charlie Unicorn, Salad Fingers. There was a whole host of this stuff that just burned through popular culture.
Oh yeah.
I had just finished a feature-length documentary. I mean, it took 3 years of my life and went around film festivals for a year. And I really wanted to go, frankly, the other way. And so to me, there was a challenge in taking this. I wanted form and function to work together. I wanted to make a short documentary about someone who hit popular culture using this program. And I wanted that short documentary to be about as long as a typical Flash animation. I wanted it to feel like you were experiencing his life just like he experienced fame and like we experienced popular culture. And it was a challenge it was a real challenge, and also to Tori, the editor, that I pushed really hard to make sure we could cut. There was no meat on it. Cut. Let's
Right.
go, and let's feel what it's like to be part of this world. When we finished this, I mean, Flash was about to get killed. Now it's been murdered, and so there was also that idea that we we wanted the film to feel like we were racing to the end, just like this program that changed so much really was racing to the end.
Maybe it's the nostalgia in me, because my computers keep giving me random updates saying you need to delete Flash, or Flash is no longer compatible. I'm like, no, I will find a way to still make this work, because Flash is a part of internet history. It's a part of me. But this gets back to another thought that I had when I first watched this, was after I realized, okay, this isn't actually a trailer. It's just made to kind of look like, a film within a trailer length. Is this a success story or a tragic tale?
I mean, I think that's kind of up to the audience. And I think that's also up to how we decide individually or even culturally if something is a success or not. What's the barometer of success? How much money you make, how many people see what you create, if you are associated with the work or not. And ultimately speaking, when you go to sleep every night, do you feel good or bad about what it is that you are doing with your life? Mm-hmm. It's complicated, and it is a giant maelstrom of stuff. If you create anything from a film festival to a piece of media, what ways in which do you decide something is actually worth your time or successful or not? Ultimately, that's an individual thing. And I mean, you can look at that in great literature. There was a point when Melville's Moby Dick, there were 2 copies left in the world. It was a huge failure when it came out. Somebody decided that it was worthy of our time as a society, and now, of course, is regarded as one of the most important books in the history of American literature. But it was 2 trash cans away from being lost completely to history, right? So that is accentuated now in this multimedia world we live in. I wanted people, when they watch this, to be like, wait, what just happened? Like, oh my goodness, I just went on a ride. And I wanted it to feel like that, because that's what popular culture is like. But that's not to take away at all from the extraordinary cinematography or the incredible editing or John W. Snyder's score. There's so much going on in this piece that I wanted it to feel like you were in the middle and then just shot into space, and then that was it. You were very warm by this individual's experience, and then it was very cold, and you were going to have to figure out what was worthy next.
That kind of speaks into what's more valuable, the art or the artist, which is a very common argument. I mean, how many songs do we know where we know the song, but we couldn't pick the singer out of a lineup, or we recognize the painting, but we can't name who the artist. Now, sometimes certainly there are people who earn that name recognition, but for a lot of what we consume, in terms of taking in art or, especially on the internet, we don't know who actually made it, but millions, if not billions of people have seen that, which is fascinating for your film to kind of turn that on its head and say, let's actually look at the person behind it, because so rarely do things end up anonymous until you read about it in their obituary or something like that.
Yeah, and I think that Jim speaks pretty remarkably about that idea, and what he's like hoping for or longing for as a person. But to go back to your original point, I mean, there you could be argued that neither the artist or the art is actually worth anything. Like that's kind of making an assumption there too, and I think that's what we also have to decide: what's worthy of our time as a culture, or even as an individual. A lot of people, this stuff is just disposable. It's just part of their disposable existence, and I know that we are both of the camp that would really like people to understand the amount of time and energy and work that goes into making even the smallest of projects. It's quite an effort. But if you live in a world of disposable anything, then no one's ever going to associate it with worth or value, and that's where I think we get into some big trouble.
I constantly tell students who ask me about films that there's a reason why the end credits take 10 minutes. You may know the director and the lead actor because they're appearing on the late night talk shows and whatnot, but the 1,000 names that go by, they all had a piece to play, and without them, that doesn't happen. So, and Jim is very much so unlike some people who did rise to internet fame for their work and efforts, one of those many anonymous people before your film who we know the work, but we don't know the artist but behind the work. And Jim seems like such a fascinating character to be around too. What is Jim up to these days?
So he actually is not in Florida anymore. I mean, even talking about like the shortness and
Mm-hmm.
the directness of this film. I mean, we did, I think, 3 field shoots in Florida from the Pacific Northwest, back and forth and back and forth. So, I mean, even this short piece had an extraordinary amount of resources that had to work, towards this end goal that we were very, very focused on. But Jim is continuing to work in the internet and the web space, and now lives in the Northeast and no longer in Florida. So hopefully he's going outside a little bit more.
Okay. Well, since the effort was with this film to make it such a trimmed down, quick, flashy piece with no excess, what ended up getting cut? I mean, what was it that maybe you wanted to include to help tell Jim's story, but it just didn't quite fit within the time frame that you wanted to do? What
Uh,
ended up on the cutting room floor?
no, that's a great question. I mean, we did multiple long scale interviews. We went through the specifics of his work in much greater detail, and really, what I wanted this to be was a kind of cross cultural look at a lot of these things that were happening simultaneously. And so I wanted to actually make a series of these little capsule kind of pieces, either one big thing or boom, 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 boom. And what we discovered was that, just like Jim is talking about, people aren't really that interested in the glories of the. I mean, not to make you sad about your MySpace documentary, but there's just not a lot of people who really feel, even though that this stuff, it's so many different kinds of multimedia and hit so many people. It's just one of those spaces in multimedia that's just going to get lost. And so we were really excited about the idea of doing more of these things, and people are like, "This is great, this is a great short film," but we're not really excited about doing a bunch more of them. So to
Right.
me, I wasn't thinking that Jim's story itself would be a bunch longer, though I do have a whole bunch of interviews and a whole bunch of B-roll and amazing stuff that we shot. To me, my goal was to be able to expand on these stories. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, there wasn't an outcry from the corporate world, surprise, surprise, about this technology being used to tell these crazy kind of stories. Again, I think I took too long to get there, but I'll tell you this right now. No one's going to put this stuff on their Apple commercials, right? Like, oh, you can make anything, and then show this array of stuff. Oh my, frogs and blenders and salad fingers and Charlie unicorns and Joe cartoons. I mean, it's just not you're not going to sell iPhones with this stuff. It's
Right, right, right.
crazy. So I was so glad to at least introduce people to the world through Jim.
But there is there's such peak nostalgia for, and that's where so many of the internet memes come from is out of random nostalgia. We're of the generation now that can look back years ago and remember, oh yeah, I messed around with those random flash videos. I made Christopher Reeve collect stem cells, and that now people think that they're just like, pop-up ads and like, oh, immediately close that. But it was actually like little mini games we could actually play. So it has, in an odd way, its own little place in gaming history as well as internet history, which I appreciate that you made this so that it isn't forgotten. But
No,
what do you, yeah,
no, I was just going to say thank you for saying that. I mean, to me too, it's worthy of a larger dive for sure. I mean, looking at what Newgrounds meant to the internet and to pop culture and to creators finding their voices and for alternative ways to tell stories, there's greatness there, but it's going to be tough to find people who could look at that in a critical way and in a fun way, and not in a that actually have the resources to move that kind of thing forward.
So aside from the instant nostalgia kick of, oh, hey, yeah, I remember doing that back in the day, what do you hope that people get out of watching Gone in a Flash?
I mean, to me, whenever you make a film about an interesting person, you just hope that it helps them reflect on their own life a little bit. And those larger questions about the disposability of media and making sure that you are backing up, as a consumer, you're backing up the people who are making the things that you really enjoy. And also just thinking a little bit about the world of disposable media around you. Where does it come from? Why are you watching it? Why is it important to you? In a very short amount of time, I wanted to get people to reflect on that. And then it's.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this film and for joining us. Gone in a Flash will be screened on Sunday, September 19th at 2:30 p.m. in our Northern Shorts category at the Ross Raglan Theater and available on demand all week long. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Kurt.